realistic was it that a Conservative government had been re-elected would have been able to engage in the sort of tax cutting we talked about at the general election? Because it looked to me like we were facing quite a difficult, both strategic and tactical problem in public spending and tax cutting. The demographic problem you've already talked about. Conservatives talk a lot about tax cuts, and you'd have to do all the things that you talked about in productivity even to stand still. So, you know, people like the Resolution Foundation argue the ability of any political party to sort of float itself politically on tax cuts is just gone. Is that an analysis you would recognise?
Well, look, I think it is going to be, of course, a challenge to bring down the tax burden. We'd started on that journey, and you know, I don't pretend that it doesn't require difficult decisions, but it's a very important strategic decision. If we want to be a dynamic economy, Conservatives look around the world and we say that the countries that are growing the fastest in North America and Asia tend to be ones with lower tax burdens. In the case of the UK, the difficult thing that we need to reform, which would both fund that but is also very good for the economy and indeed for society, is to tackle the problems that we have in our welfare state. And in particular, the fact that every year since the pandemic, we've been signing off 80,000 people a year who we say are not just too ill to work, but they're too ill even to consider looking for work. So they are automatically signed off, and only 1% of that cohort get back into the world of work every month. So it comes down very, very slowly. So my worry about the last 12 weeks is that Labour have got themselves so badly burnt with the mess they've got into over winter fuel allowance that welfare reform will now become untouchable for them, because they just won't want to have, I mean, you know, if they worried about a battle with the Labour Party on, you know, benefits paid to pensioners, including wealthier pensioners, you can imagine how challenging it will be to tackle the bill for working age disabled people, which is due to increase by £25 billion a year, £25 billion a year over the next 5 years. It's a huge, huge increase. But, you know, the argument we Conservatives make is that if you do have mental health issues, one of the worst possible things is to be signed off having to look for work, because that means your isolation is likely to increase and your mental health problems are likely to get worse. So that is a very, very crucial area, both for public finances and also if we want to reduce the dependence on immigration in the economy, that really needs to be tackled. And, you know, I think as Conservatives in opposition, we have got to be making the case strongly that those are the kind of difficult decisions the government should be taking.
So Labour's going to introduce more employment rights, which I think the Conservative Party will attempt to argue, you know, I think correctly, that this will reduce the growth they're hoping to promote. But it's also a political trap, obviously. Once it's introduced, it'll be very difficult to reverse, and the Conservative Party will find itself opposing rights that people will like. So how does one navigate politically, first of all, the stance initially, balancing the growth versus the fact that people like these rights, and then the strategic problem, once you've opposed them, do you promise to reverse them? And do you get stuck?
Well, you know, these are calls where we have to recognise, you know, we were beaten fair and square in the election, and, you know, we have to think like an opposition. And all I would say is that, you know, when you think like an opposition, the reason that the electorate change their mind about you and decide that having thrown you out, actually they want to trust you again, is if they can see that you are advocating proper solutions and not always the easy solutions. So I think it's very important as we embark on this new chapter that we don't always jump on the easiest bandwagons, because the electorate are watching carefully. So I think on all these issues, if there's a principal case to make that the changes Labour are making are going to damage employment, mean fewer jobs, mean unemployment goes up, then of course we should make that case. But what we need to remember more than anything else, I mean, I think that sadly, every Labour government in history has left with unemployment higher than when they arrived in. I think if they do what Angela Rayner wants, that will happen to this government. We need to be the party that has the solution to these problems and does so in a credible way.
Let me ask you a couple of questions that relate to your, to your success as a candidate at the election, but also to the party's broader lack of success in the general election. First of all, your own. You held off the Liberal Democrats, and now there's this debate in the party. Does the party need to face towards the Liberal Democrats and get votes back from the Liberal Democrats that it lost, or does it need to fight reform? Some people say, obviously, we need to do both. Mathematically, you can see that that's the case, but it's very difficult to do that. So what does it do in this dilemma?
Well, I think first thing to say is that a number of the people who were part of my campaign in Godalming and Ash are in the audience. And can I just take the liberty of asking everyone to give them a big round of applause, because they did an amazing job. I think the answer to that question, without sounding too much like Boris and having your cake and eating it, is that we need votes from all those groups. We need reform votes, we need Liberal Democrat votes, we need the votes of people who stayed at home, and the trap to fall into, and it is a trap, is to think that as people get fed up with the Labour government, and judging by the last 12 weeks, that's starting to happen far more quickly than people were expecting. But as they get fed up, to assume that they will automatically come back to us. I mean, we were trounced at the election. We got ourselves into a position where, and this is a very uncomfortable thing for Conservatives, but we got ourselves into a position when people looked at the problems the country faced and the problems in the NHS and the cost of living crisis and all these things, challenges with immigration, and they began to think that we were part of the problem, not part of the solution. That is very uncomfortable. Now, I know, and you know, everyone in this hall knows, that we faced the most enormous global challenges over the last 14 years. We took the tough and difficult decisions to get the country back on track, but it doesn't work just to tell that to the electorate. We tried that at the election. We now have to earn their trust and show that we have listened. And if we win that big argument, the argument that we are actually prepared to take the difficult decisions that will secure the extraordinary future of this country, that it's our potential to do so, then we will start to get voters back from left, right and centre. If we follow a narrow political strategy of saying we're just going to go for this group of voters on this issue and that group of voters on that issue, people will think we're thinking about ourselves, not about the country. So that's why I think I am actually very encouraged when I listen to what our 4 outstanding leadership candidates are saying. They are thinking about those big issues. They are getting into the mindset that we had in 2005 when I was first elected. How do we win this argument so that we can get back into office in 1 term and not 2 or 3 as happened before?